Well, thankfully the sun seems to be following me around at the moment. You find me here on this gorgeous day at the Silverstone circuit in Northamptonshire, where I'm paying a visit to the guys at Biketrac to talk about bike security. A few weeks ago, one of the engineers from Biketrac came and fitted a tracker to this bike. Now, obviously, I'm not going to show you what that tracker looks like or where it gets fitted or how it gets installed. That's all part of the secrecy, that's all part of the security, and that's obviously something that Biketrac don't want to show you. But we will get in there and have a chat to Bill Taylor, talk about everything that this system can do. We're going to knock off some myths, answer some questions or the kind of questions that get asked about these systems, and then we'll show it in action and show you what you can expect. So let's get cracking. Right, so we've moved in out from the sunshine and I'm here with Bill from Biketrac, and what I wanted to do was, while I had the opportunity, is just pick Bill's brain, because there's a lot of information in there about this stuff.
A little bit of history about the company then. Biketrac was launched 15 years ago. So at the time when we launched Biketrac, alarms were the most popular sort of bit of security for motorbikes.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last few years, tracking's really proven itself. So when we launched, the typical recovery rate for a motorbike in the industry was about 40%.
Okay.
Now with tracking, it's well over 90% of chance of getting your bike back.
Right. Do thieves more often than not, because of the growth of trackers, will now take a bike and move it to a location and then leave it there to see if anything happens?
Very much so. But
Okay.
they're quite ballsy. You know, we've had situations where a bike's been left outside of one of our dealers in London, actually lined up with their own bikes.
Oh, okay.
So typically they'll leave it on the side of the road or where it should be. They put a cover over it, put their own lock and chain on it potentially, just to make it look like it should be there.
Yeah.
So if it's not being recovered within 24 hours, the thieves have got away with it and that's it. Or if the bike's been recovered, the thieves have still got away with it.
Essentially then, it's that first period that's quite critical, is getting that notification, getting the location. But one question I did have, obviously there's a lot of options out there on the marketplace in terms of tracking. You give the simplest form, which would be something like an Apple AirTag that you could buy and hide on the bike and do that yourself. And then there's obviously other solutions on the marketplace, each offering a slightly different level of service. I don't know if you can give just your impression of the framework of where those sit, and obviously how that compares to the Biketrac solution.
I think ultimately depends on what the customer wants. If they just want something they can self-track because they're occasionally away from home or something, or in the event of a theft, they want a better chance of getting their bike back, I suppose there's different products for that. So we're a Thatcham accredited product.
Okay.
So quick test for you. You've heard of Thatcham?
Yes.
They've got different accreditations. For example, if you've got a Cat 1 and I've got a Cat 4 rated product,
okay,
who do you think's got a better or worse?
Well, these are always tricky because you're never quite sure whether 1 to 5 is or 5 to 1. I would say category 1 would be the better option.
Okay. So category 1 is an alarm.
Okay.
A Cat 4 is a locking wheel nut.
Right, okay.
So I'll try and use that as a bit of an analogy to show that the category Thatcham accreditations are simply a description of a product, absolutely nothing to do with how good it or bad it is.
Right, okay, interesting. Okay.
So under tracking, there's two. There's S5 and S7.
Okay.
Now these have changed over the last 10 years, but currently where we sit, it doesn't matter what the technology the device has. So for example, we use GPS, GSM and GPRS to send the comms like most trackers do. We also have the ability of RF as well, which is radio frequency.
Right, okay.
So the technology doesn't really matter. The only difference between an S5 and an S7 is a key fob. So there's some trackers on the market that do a great job and they offer a fob which stops an alert coming through.
Sure.
For a motorbike, it doesn't really make a difference because they're very rarely stolen with a key. I think in 15 years we've had about 4 bikes stolen with a key, and one of them the key was left in the ignition. From a security point of view, something that's Thatcham accredited means you're going to get the support. So most Thatcham accredited products will have a call centre.
Okay.
So that means you're paying for a subscription, which when you add that onto everything else is a bit of a cost, but that's what makes such a big difference. Because at 1 o'clock in the morning, something happens, your AirTag might vibrate or other products on the market will send you an alert, you might get that but you probably won't hear it or anything like that, or
No.
because your phone's on silent. So we offer telephone call, text, email, push notification. Although with the phone, you can put your phone on DND, but you can put the phone number as a favourite, so at least ring. But the quicker we can get hold of the customer to let them know something's happened, the quicker we can act on it.
So once that gets triggered and the alarm is picked up by the call centre, they'll make that call. What's the next step then if I was to say, oh, actually, I'm indoors, I don't know anything about this?
Well, first of all, like you say, we'll contact you. Now, we can't do anything until you confirm the theft.
Sure.
So we ask you to verify if it's been stolen. If it's a false alarm, because it's at a dealership, it just gets reset, it doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah.
Or, shit, it's been stolen.
Right.
So customer calls 999, get a crime number, calls our monitoring centre back, and we pick up and do everything on behalf of the customer.
Okay.
That's the service customers are paying for.
Yes.
Because a lot of products, self-tracking, for example, that's very much reliant on you. So it depends on where you want to go. If you want to go and, yes, you'll get an alert the bike's moved. GPS tends to be lost in the back of a van, for example.
Right, okay.
Or if it's hidden in the container or something like that. So that's why we use the RF. So in that element, we can send a team out to help locate it. But if you're using GPS on its own, that becomes rather tricky.
And then the RF, that's going to allow you to pinpoint that. How sort of close can you pinpoint it?
RF, we can get down to 1 metre. So, for example, if there was 10 garages or containers, I've got some photos I can share with you. We can get down to 1 door.
Right, okay.
So I've got photos of the container yard at Tilbury. 250 grey containers, all identical, and we got down to 1.
Wow. Okay.
There was a GS in there with all little parts as well that had been nicked off of the
pretty
bikes.
accurate. And I think that's the thing. Obviously, the pushback from people is the expense. So you have to pay for the installation, pay for the unit and the installation, and everything else. But then there's that ongoing cost. But from my perspective, I was looked at that and said, well, if my bike gets stolen and I kind of get a notification and I have a look on the map, if it's in a dodgy part of town, I don't really, personally, want to go and try to find that, because you don't know what you're walking into. So I think that there's a peace of mind in knowing that actually we've got professionals that are going to go and do that, and you don't have to get involved in any of that dirty work. And personally, I don't mind paying that extra for that. But I guess that's the judgment call that people need to make.
But again, with most insurance companies, they recognise the device. So outside the initial outlay, once it's been fitted, for example, we're from £6 a month. Most insurance companies can give between 5 to 15% discount, potentially, which then can make a discount on the insurance. So that helps contribute towards the subscription you're paying.
So it's kind of, it's giving back some of that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but again, if your bike is stolen, we get it shows, oh, I don't want it back. Fair enough, but then if you don't get it back, your insurance company's got to pay out.
Following Bill's comments, I thought it would be good to get in touch with an insurance company to get their view on it. So I spoke to my friends at Bikesure, and they had this to say. While the ideal outcome is always to prevent a theft from happening in the first place, that's not always possible. In the unfortunate event that a motorcycle is stolen, a tracking device like Biketrac can dramatically increase the likelihood of recovery, from barely above 0 to over 90% in many cases. Quick recovery benefits everyone. The owner gets their bike back, often before major damage occurs. Manufacturers and police gain valuable intelligence that can help disrupt organised crime, and insurers avoid paying out for total losses. From an insurance perspective, widespread tracker use can help reduce overall claims costs that in turn help stabilise or even lower premiums for riders. Insurers usually also offer discounted premiums up to 15% for bikes fitted with approved tracking devices, making them a smart investment both for peace of mind and your pocket. On the flip side, unrecovered vehicles mean larger total loss claims, which ultimately will increase everyone's insurance premiums over time. So we've got a little bit of detail on the units itself, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. One of the questions that crops up that I've seen in certainly on reviews and videos on YouTube, and it's a problem that I've had as well, there is some question over battery drain. How do Biketrac do it?
So, like we alluded to, there's several products on the market already for tracking. Now, you get ones that are wired into the bike, so we can take a power, or you got the battery only devices, which are great because you can hide them easily, you don't have to wire anything in. Now there's pros and cons to those. They tend to have their own battery life that can be between 3 to 5 years. Okay. The only downside to those is how often they update.
Is that intentional as a battery saving option?
Yes.
So for them to say, well, we've only got this battery on the device, therefore we're not going to ping. Right, okay.
Basically, that's a way, because once that internal battery is done, it's done. Okay. So for the device just to update once a day, which is quite common for battery-only units, that means you wouldn't find out till 24 hours later that something's happened.
Right, okay.
Like we discussed earlier on, that golden hour, so to speak, is really quite important.
Yeah, sure.
So our unit's wired into the bike. It gives the dealer a chance to hide it in various places, so we're not always in the same place.
Yeah.
We avoid plug and play, because that means it's always in the same place. You can unplug it, disconnect and throw it away.
Yeah.
So we get spliced into the loom. So it's only 3 wires, a live earth and a switch feed.
Right.
Our devices are fully charged before they go onto the bike.
Okay.
So via the dealer. That means we don't touch the bike's battery at all. Attachment security products have a backup battery. So ours lasts up to 30 days on its own.
Right, okay.
So when you turn the ignition off, you park the bike up, we start cannibalising our own battery at that point.
Right, okay.
If you don't use the bike for 6 weeks, maybe over Christmas for example, like anything, there's a bit of a draw, but we only draw 4 to 6 milliamps.
Right, okay.
But we will send you an alert. Depending on the battery, if you want the alert sooner rather than later, you can knock that up to 12.4 volts or 12 volts. Generally our default's 11.7.
Yep.
So if your bike hits 11.7, we'll send you an alert to let you know, at which point go for a ride, put a trickle charger on it, or some form of charging. We cannibalise our own battery when you're parked up. So once that's dropped by about 15%, 3 weeks to a month roughly, we only draw then 4 to 6 milliamps to charge ourselves back up, and then we stop. So we have what's called a cool-on counter.
Right, okay.
When you're riding, we take a constant charge.
Okay, yeah.
Because the voltage is there, so it's nice and easy.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, I'm not gonna. We can't show the device or how it was installed, but I was there watching the guy when he was installing it. They don't mess around. There's no like, oh, we'll just put it in the easiest place that we can install it. It's like, no, we're gonna have to start shifting bits and pieces and get it kind of well tucked away.
For any tracking product, that's the Achilles heel. Yeah. That's the one thing we can't control. And we ask dealers never to go under the seat and never go directly to the battery. Because in the event of a theft, they're the first 2 things that come off. The seat, disconnect the battery. Yeah. So hence, that's why we have our own internal. So if the battery is disconnected, we can still last up to 30 days.
The other thing I've yet to speak about is the app. Biketrac have an AllTrac app, which is a really useful piece of kit. Within the app, you can see your assets, the usage, which will show you the number of journeys, the total distance, total hours. It kind of tracks all of that stuff. Then you've got a servicing element. Obviously, if you're taking your bike in for a service or having some work done on it, then you don't necessarily want that alarm going off all the time, so you can set that so that the bike can be moved around and it won't trigger an alarm. There's plenty of options inside to do that. When you look at the assets, it'll give you first of all a screen to show you where it was and if it's got a good location fix. In this case, it has got a good location fix. You can click to view the full map and it will show a very detailed map of where the bike actually is, and it will show its status. So in this case it's armed for movement, the ignition is off, and it just shows the odometer and the battery levels as well. At the bottom you've got the details, which is what this is. You've got settings, and that gives you your security mode. So this is on the standard setting, so the alarm is moved without keys. If you switch it to holiday, you can alarm it for any movement regardless of if the keys are on there or not. So if somebody was to break into your house, find the keys, take them out to the bike, on here you can set that to say, well, I'm on holiday, if that key is starting the bike, that is nothing to do with me, and it will trigger the call center to start tracking it. And obviously servicing, if you click into servicing, you can put a specific date and time in there. So if you know the bike's going to be at the dealers from 10 till 1, you can set it between those times that you won't get an alert if the bike gets moved or shaken or whatever it may be. So you've got all those in there. The battery section is where you'll set the low battery threshold. This one's set at 11.7 volts, but you can change that if you want to. There's an alert section in the bottom there that will just give you the contact details, so it will show you what email address, what telephone number the alerts are going to go to. And if you click the history tab, then you can look at the locations that you visited or the journeys that you've made. Just set a date range in there, start the search, and it will bring up a list of the journeys that you made, so you can actually track what you've been doing as well. So it's a great app, not complicated, just does what you need it to do, allows you to go in and change the settings and set it up exactly how you want to. But obviously if the the tracker is triggered by movement, you'll get a notification on here, as well as a telephone call from the call centre and all that stuff that we've already learnt about. So a really useful piece of kit to have. So we've had a really good level of detail on the system. I think I've probably got one closing question for you, Bill. Obviously the Biketrac system is a very sophisticated piece of equipment, but I guess in terms of security, it's really still only part of that. So although you've got that there, and what that does is work in the event of a theft, I presume the best form of security is to stop it get stolen in the first place.
100% a layered approach. So for example, at home, a decent ground anchor. If you can, mount them on the wall.
Okay.
Not on the floor.
All right, okay.
Caveat, depends on the wall.
Sure.
Not something you can easily push over, but if the chain's swinging, it's harder to cut. And again, if you're looking at a chain, get something that's sold secure. So it's been tried and tested. Squire, for example, is one of the many brands, same as Abbas, and there's lots out there. Spend £200 or £300 on a decent chain.
Okay.
They're not going to cut the ground anchor, they're going to cut the chain.
Right.
But if you're spending 50 quid to £100 on a chain, work those costings back. By the time you've taken off the VAT, you've taken off markups, etc. like that, what's that actual metal worth?
Right, okay.
Is it quality? Because if you can come along, put two links together, hit with a hammer, they fall apart.
Yeah.
Not really.
No.
So when you're at home, let's say decent lock and chain, if you can raise the chain. When you're away from home, a cover. You know, just something simple. It can, a folderby cover they can stick under the seat. Potentially a decent disc lock. Again, sole secure.
Okay.
Now, depending on the bike, put the disc lock through the rear sprocket. Although they're called disc locks, I know they can go through the front brake disc, but the wheel could be popped out, the wheel can be left there, and they put a new one inside the bike.
Right, okay.
Or they just cut a hole in the disc.
What about markings? Because that's been a popular thing. Is that still a relevant element? Does the marking make a difference?
It does, definitely. I recovered Charlie Borman when he was working with BMW many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, his bike was stolen from outside his house in Chelsea.
Okay.
We found it in Watford. Now, this only happened overnight, and literally the guy bought it off Gumtree in 24 hours.
Okay.
But the clock set had been removed, and also the number plate had been removed.
Right.
So marking was the way we can actually identify the bike.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
That's where it plays its game for us.
Yeah.
Because they've got the UV etching, they've got the hologram. Because it's registered, that means we can actually use that data, which the police are aware of as well, and we could use that to identify actually this is the bike that we want.
If people do have any questions, if something's stirred you or you've picked up on something, then drop the questions down below. I'm not going to answer them, but obviously I've got a conduit to Bill here, so if there's anything you need to know about anything we've talked about, let me know in the comments section and I'll get the questions over to you and we'll get those answered. But other than that, thank you for your time.
No trouble.
Thank you.